Hello there, friends. I'm Alan IHOLDSHIFT on a Frio,
And I'm Andy Proper Neckrich.
and this is the Defuse. Welcome, friends. Welcome back. It's good to see you guys. It is day number 3. I actually had to think about that for a second because I wasn't sure what day of the playoffs we're in. We've got a lot of COD to talk over, so let's go ahead and get this fuse lit. Proper first matchup: New York, Chicago. A lot of people on their brackets had been posting saying New York, absolutely no problem. They could take down Chicago. They haven't looked all that good. And they would be right in the first one. The subliners nearly flawless in the first rotation on the Ramaza hard point, especially through the first 4 hills, giving them what would have been an insurmountable lead in the first map. And you thought for a moment there that New York was going to start to run away with this series on the Arklov Peak. Would not happen. Chicago able to bounce back, and they close things out with Scump in king mode on that final search and destroy. Your initial thoughts, just kind of watching this series unfold in front of our eyes.
Yeah, we were watching this together as we typically do, and I was sitting there just thinking to myself, I'm just like, well, New York. I mean, taking both these hard points off of arguably the best hard point team inside the entire CDL right now. I was ready to write this one off, but then Scump hit that king mode, and then they picked that crown off the ground and they put it right on their head, and they went absolutely balls to the wall. And well, they were not stopping anytime soon. It was mostly around just in the tail end of the first half of the domination and throughout the entirety of the second half. You could just see how Chicago were really starting to play together. And then in those final moments on St. Petrograd Search and Destroy. I mean, let's not forget that St. Petrograd Search and Destroy was also the one map that when Chicago were down 5-0 against Minnesota Rocker, that they were able to full sail all the way back for that victory. So you can never count out this team on St. Petro Search and Destroy to begin with. But with Scump going absolutely off the rails, even with Persini feeding themselves mindlessly through the middle of the map towards Blue Square on defense, it didn't necessarily matter. They were winning 1v odd situations. That's with RCDs and Scump included. Envoy was playing their role wonderfully. Formal was locking down longer sight lines. It was just
Yeah.
a beautiful sight to see.
Collective, I would say, I think overall, especially considering, I mean, how many times have we talked about this Chicago team and we've been a little bit concerned about their search and destroy over the last couple of weeks, right? I mean, that has been like the one moment where it's like Chicago looking like a top team again, but their search and destroy is not there. So the
Right.
interesting thing is now you kind of flip the script, and for New York, they come away with some massive hard point wins. And I feel like the conversation kind of shifts a little bit, quite literally, to the fact that New York, they have just now beaten, I would say pretty convincingly, the best hardpoint team in the CDL on 2 straight hardpoint maps, one of which was very convincing.
I mean, that's definitely fair to say. Convincing, nevertheless. I think that when you're talking about Chicago and their search and destroy, maybe not looking as fantastic as you might have thought, especially throughout the earlier parts of the season now, and even towards the tail end. Remember when we started working our way through the M4 meta, 10 millimeter was becoming bagged. That's when we were sitting there saying that their search and destroy was arguably getting a lot better, was it not? I mean, like that's something that you could definitely see throughout the entirety of those home series. Although maybe not having the utmost victories in map counts, that their search and destroy was getting better. They were getting more comfortable with each other. They were falling into their roles more throughout when formal RCDs was playing off with what weapon they were running, what role they were fulfilling. But then in the past couple weeks before champs, I started to see a lot of better success, especially in their search and destroy.
Well, I mean, I want to focus on New York's hardpoint because this is a team that at the London home series, they won one hardpoint map. And all the maps were close, to be fair, but they only won one of the hardpoint maps. Now they come in versus the best hardpoint team in the league, and they take two. They took both of theirs yesterday, granted, or 2 days ago. Was it 2 days ago? 2 days ago.
2 days ago.
Or versus the Minnesota Rocker. No, that was yesterday. It feels like forever ago. That was yesterday. That's nuts, I think, overall. For the fact that you can sit there and you can take 4 straight hardpoint maps, that's good news for New York, I think, moving forward, even though they lose this series. I think that that's going to be something that if you go down to that losers bracket, you play either London or Paris, whoever wins tomorrow.
Sure.
You should be feeling pretty good about those two opponents who I would argue is some of their better modes is the hardpoint. You're perfect so far on hardpoint. It's good stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you go back to the Ramaza. You already talked about it in the entire intro for this entire series. Damn near flawless rotations coming through from New York. You could
Impressive.
also you could probably chalk that up to just how split that we saw Chicago playing. It was a very 3-2 differential to how you saw them playing out throughout the map. Scump and Pristini were always trying to make their heroic plays and trying to find their 1v odd situations. Were getting absolutely bamboozled all the way until the fourth hard point inside construction. But I mean, even for that next hard point on it was just one of those things that I don't necessarily want to say because it was incredibly close. But it was mostly just mid-map control that I felt like that was always in Chicago's favor. But when it came down to rotations, New York have definitely been able to step up their hardpoint game. They definitely had a clear-cut decision on how they wanted to come out against these hardpoints. When you're going up against Chicago, again, arguably the best hardpoint team inside the league, you're definitely going to have to come with a little bit of pizzazz, just like New York did today.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think that's good stuff overall. And I think that's, again, a big prospect for them moving forward. But for Chicago, we've talked about the possible concerns, not just in the search and destroy, but the simple fact that there have been some question marks as far as has their rehearsal followed suit to how they play the game when they're in a match setting. That had been, at least when I was talking to Arsenal, not the case. They were practicing at maybe 60% and they were trying to play at 120%. Well, who gave 120% today? King Scump back in the action. It's always champs time that people sit there right before they say, Scump, he doesn't have it anymore. He's washed up. Nah, man, he popped off. He was 12-0 or something of that nature near the late stages of the Petro Search and Destroy, which didn't get too far because Chicago smoked it. But throughout the entirety of the series, Scump played, I think, his best Call of Duty of the year in this matchup. And that's incredible news if you're a Huntsman fan.
Oh, absolutely. You definitely love to see it. I mean, when you do reach playoffs, I mean, they even talked about that in a losing fashion, of course, with Aqua and the Gorillas. But I mean, it's the same thing with Scump, and it's something that you have to be very cognizant of when you are going against a member in the CDL that's been playing. What do they say? This is like their seventh or eighth champs throughout Call of Duty and all of its history. So I mean, for Scump to just to drop double digits, I don't remember the specific number, but I remember seeing that 12-1 at one point when they were on defense. But you got to see a lot of different parts of what makes Scump just such an astounding member. The patience, the trigger discipline. And then you also just got to see the overall explosiveness
Yeah,
that if
it's
he's in a
raw skill.
1v2 situation, yeah, that raw skill just cannot could you have to be able to try to punish that. If you're not trading that out, then I don't even know what to tell you. Really, I couldn't give you more. If he's winning 1v3 situations, that's just a fired up member of Chicago Huntsman that, like Schiff said, you definitely love to see if you're a fan of this.
I remember the beginning of the year. I was watching one of Scump's streams, and I think he was playing on Gunrunner, and there was a hard point, and he was just snapping on everybody. And I like last year, it was like, okay, Black Ops 4, with the way that the game was going, that was a conversation of like who was going to run the grapple SOG. Was it going to be TJ? Was it going to be Scump? Was it going to be essentially both players running the SOG? A lot of conversation about that early on, but at the beginning of this year, I was like, this is Scump's game, man. Like, he's going to take this game over. And he really didn't. I think a lot of that was simply because the fact that the ARs have kind of ran the entire league this year. But when you've got Scump in this type of form, I think Pac-Man hit it perfectly on the desk to wrap this show. If Scump does what he did today versus Atlanta tomorrow, Chicago might win it all. Like those hard point losses, yeah. Again, the one that was close was the Hackney Yard, in which New York secured it pretty comfortably. But if he can play like that in respawn continually, and you find a way to get Formal and Arseny's more involved, dude, this Chicago team very well could be a favorite. I actually really enjoyed that take from Pac-Man on the desk.
Yeah, I think from here on out, especially through champs, it's just consistency that you're looking at for
Yeah.
Scump in particular. Envoy also had a pretty consistent day across all five maps that we got to see from Chicago. You already said it. I mean, if Formal can come back to their brighter spots, especially on hardpoint, I felt like that was probably one of their biggest fumbles. Brasini was getting caught in their over aggressive ways and getting caught out more often than not. Didn't necessarily help out Chicago in their rotations, but when you're able to clean up on those two aspects of what failed them on their hard points today,
Yeah.
Scump's only going to shine brighter, and it's only going to make the Chicago Huntsmen more scary to face off, regardless of
It's
the
one of
team.
those, yeah, it's one of those things that's like that Ramaza, I think, was just really fluky. I think, when you take a look at how things kind of started off, the fact that Chicago kind of allowed a couple of unnecessary breaks to come through, that's one of those things that's like, you don't anticipate that happening from here on out. It's just one of those things that, yeah, it was a little, I mean, yeah, you got to give credit to New York, not trying to take any away, but it felt a little fluky in nature as far as how how that first rotation kind of went. But moving forward, talking about our second matchup of the day, the Toronto Ultra give a go against the Florida Mutineers. This was the one team that eluded them at their own home series, in which they were able to take down the other top three teams in the league. This would be the number 4 team they needed to find a win against, and they would. Yes, the Azir Cave got cut off, and it apparently was a close game, but Toronto came out absolutely lights out on the first rotation of Hills for Azir Cave, putting themselves up right around 100 points, and apparently Florida was able to make it close, but they do get a very lucky final last tick. From there, Hackney Yard domination would be tight, but Toronto would do just enough to stay in the lead. And then how about that Petro hardpoint, Mr. Proper? 1 point. And it went to another P2. We don't often see Petro go to a third rotation P2, but it was scrappy enough for Toronto to win that rotation and hold off Florida from getting the win.
I mean, just how much time was given and being contested
Insane,
throughout
dude.
the entire
Insane.
hard point of St. Petra. That was a very fun closing map of the entire day. I mean, you quite literally couldn't get closer than that. I mean, 250 to 249, that single point that then ticked over. Toronto, last minute effort just to contest P1 after Havoc and Skies were just going off the rails with Awakening on P1. Just when you thought that it was about to be all over, Toronto somehow find themselves contesting P1. And like Shift said, you never really find a third set of P2 on St. Petrograd, but somehow, some way, Toronto just hold on. But the domination was probably the most exciting for me personally, watching Toronto, even after starting off on the favored side. Yeah, they were only leading by an abysmal amount, but it was still,
What, 12 to 15 points, something like that?
yeah, it was 82 to 70. It was 81 to 72 at the end of the half, but it was how quickly they were able to retake the favored side of Hackney Yard, and then just how they were always manipulating top green, and then right down to the final minutes. Just when you thought that you were going to see Florida Mutineers come back in domination, that Toronto Ultra, they were able to showcase the same thing that we saw throughout their entire home series, their brains, and just being
Yeah.
able to just showcase their ability. Okay, well, you're going to go ahead and take the A flag. We just spawned C. There's nobody over at C. We're just going to solo hold C, and there's literally nothing you can do about it because it's Hackney Yard, and you're not going to convincingly flip the spawns that quickly.
Yeah, I mean, you know my opinion on Hackney Yard as a map.
It's your favorite
so
map in the game. Yeah,
it's
I understand.
absolutely. I love that map, dude. I wish we had that in all of our map
Yeah,
sets for
it's a
every
great
single
map.
map. Just
Fantastic
Hackney Yard,
map.
everything. Just 5 maps of Hackney Yard.
Mhm.
But I want to kind of take it from the opposite perspective for the Florida Mutineers. It's one of those things that they're still on a life raft here. They're not out of this. And that was an absolutely tremendously close series. Through and through. I would say the Piccadilly was closer than I think Florida like how Florida actually played the map. Like the 6-4, I think it felt more like a 6-2 the way Florida was playing the map overall. But you essentially at Azir Cave, if Toronto doesn't get that final tick on P5, you see P1 again, and you have a chance to close that game out because you're in the position to zone them back behind the P2 spawns or P5 spawns, however you want to
Sure.
label them, over on the right side of the map. And a single point on the Petro hard point. And then the Hackney Yard domination, like you mentioned, it was close throughout that first half, and it stayed close all the way throughout. So it's one of those things that for Florida, I think that what we saw was the fact that Toronto was just an incredible team, and not that Florida's a bad one. I mean, Toronto at this point in time now has beaten all of the top 4 teams. They're on a 6-match winning streak. And the other 2 teams that they beat are also good squads in the London Royal Ravens and Optic Gaming LA. So I wouldn't be too down on this if you're a Florida Mutineer fan. And I think when you look at who they play up against next, I think you feel pretty good about their opportunity to take down the winner of either Minnesota or Optic based on how they look today. That's the biggest thing. It sucks to lose that series. I think it could have and probably, in a lot of people's minds, should have gone to a 5th map. And I think we would have seen Florida take it if it were to get to 5. But I think you feel okay about how you played today overall.
I'm gonna argue that I think that Ramaza Search and Destroy probably would have gone to around 11. We probably would have had a second chance of getting a burrito today, brother,
Burritos,
because
dude.
yeah.
I've missed
I mean,
out on my chance for the
me and
Chicago game,
Pistachio,
dude.
yeah, me and Pistachio, the producer, we got our free burritos, but Alan over here
Bro,
just
I
just doesn't know
spelled
how to,
chalk wrong, dude.
just doesn't know how to spell.
It's bad. It's bad. So, because like it was the numbers afterward, and I was trying to speed type it. I don't know if I could actually show this at all on stream, but that's not going to show up, is it? No, that's just wait. Chalk if 268, dude. And then Chipotle hit me with we didn't quite catch that. Oh, of course you did it. This feels bad, dude. I missed out by that much.
Imagine
as soon as I sent that text, you sent yours. You're like, I got the burrito. And I was like, wait, why did I get one? Because I spelled the word wrong, dude. Pissed.
Imagine thinking Chalked has an F at the end of it in 2020.
I'm not
Holy
going
shit.
there.
But I mean,
Uh,
Toronto Ultra, going back to my
yeah,
previous
dude.
point, like they're 6-4 on the Ramaz Search and Destroy, where Florida Mutineers, yes, are 7-4. I guess you could argue maybe that one map difference would be good for them. I think that that would have been a lot closer than Piccadilly, because Piccadilly, when you went in towards a round number 9, Cammy was still just vibing out with the sniper rifle, not ultimately finding the value. And you could also make the argument that in the final round, yes, once Cammy put it away and picked up an M4, they got absolutely railed, but it was also just a linear setup in decision making that was coming through from Toronto Ultra. That was the ultimate demise on that Toronto Ultra side for Piccadilly, which is why I'm going to agree with Shift that it felt like a 6-2, just
Yeah.
for how terrible Toronto truly looked in those middle of the rounds and how little value they were necessarily finding. That's also Florida Mutineers on Piccadilly within a nutshell. They know when to play aggressive. They know where to pop their dead silence and put themselves in prime positions to be able to shut you down. As little as we've seen Piccadilly throughout the entirety of the year, this team on this map mode combo will always ring on true. But I think that if it went to a map 5, it probably would have felt just as close as that 1 point difference on St. Petra.
Yeah, 100%. And, it's just one of those things that Ramaza has been, I think, a staple of what we've seen from Toronto Search and Destroy. But I think the way that they looked versus London yesterday brings a lot of concern to the table. Would have brought a lot of concern for the table. And based on how the picks were going, that actually would have been Florida's pick for that map. Not that it would have made much of a difference because the first 3 maps went opposite direction of who picked them. But still, I think that if you're Toronto, you're happy to see this one get done in 4 and not go to 5, because I think 5 would have brought a lot of stress, and we know our good friend Visions probably would have been chewing out his fingers, not just fingernails. So looking at tomorrow's games again, it's starting in the lower bracket. So elimination matches to start the day. Minnesota plays up against Optic Gaming LA. And my big question, I think, as we get to this matchup is with how Optic have looked and the fact that they hold the edge in this head-to-head series, can Exceed bring Minnesota to some sort of favorable light in this matchup? Because personally, I think that the way that Optic have looked, at least historically over the last couple of weeks, has been the better squad. Pretty head over heels about it.
I would agree. I would agree that Optic definitely look a lot better than Minnesota in recent weeks. I'm not necessarily sure if Exceed has enough sauce to bring to the table to glaze over Optic LA and their run that we're able to see. I mean, Draza and Hollow, they still looked really good in that match versus LAG, albeit, and we'll keep all those conversations aside, just on a continuation for how good Optic have looked since they picked up these miraculous youngsters. I
Mm.
think that, again, something that we also talked about on that day that we were talking about Optic LA versus the Gorillas was just that Kenny was also playing lights out when they
Yeah,
were
he
in the
really
map.
was. Yeah.
And that's something that you have to be concerned with when you're going up against Minnesota. Can you keep up with that pace? We're not just looking at a seam, but it's the entire team. Can you keep up with the pace that we've been seeing through for Optic LA? Because this team, in a moment's notice, will be able to run you over, especially with how Draza plays. We've been seeing it through the Challengers years. Hollow can keep up pace with that too. Slasher, when they're playing angry, has definitely shown up to the table. And then TJ Halley also probably looked the best in that matchup that I have seen in quite some time from TJ, ever since the probably launch weekend, especially from Optic LA.
It's one of those things that you got to remember that, yeah, Optic Gaming and LA and LAG went 5 games, but did it? It's like because of the
No, it
lagouts,
didn't.
did it actually go 5? And
No.
the thing that I will still say, for Optic Gaming LA is that there were still some mistakes that were cropping up in search, still some mistakes that kind of cropped up in domination. Hard to get a full read on what was happening in the hard point, but the same conversation we've had is, can Minnesota bring composure? This is going to get chaotic. I think the hard points are going to be a little wild and they're going to go down to the wire. And Minnesota has routinely over the last couple of weeks suffered in those moments. So that's my kind of bigger question. I think Exceed has definitely showcased that he's bringing enough resiliency with the sniper rifle to do well in search and destroy if Optic allow him to pick that up. I'm interested to see what he does on the search and destroy when he's not sniping, but I think beyond that, we're going to be in for some really hot respawns tomorrow. So I think that composure is going to be what makes or breaks this series, I think, for Minnesota, and I just don't think they're going to bring it. London, Paris. We've seen the battle for Europe many times throughout the year. London have some favor, I think, with how Scraps has looked, but Paris has been pretty nasty lately. Straight cold off that gun under hard point they started their playoff run on. Do you think that this one will favor the potential underdog of Paris, or do you think London have enough to get through them?
I mean, aren't Paris still leading in the matchup over Europe against London?
Yeah, 2-1. Yeah.
It's
Barely.
2-1
It's a
for
seven
sure.
seven five. I mean, the maps have been really, really close in the past.
And the last time that London and Paris faced off against each other, London quite literally beat themselves. They were
Yeah.
just
Yes.
they
Yes.
we
Yes.
just
Yes.
didn't see them playing in the same form. But if Scraps is able to showcase their ability, like how we even saw, yes, it was a 3-1 loss versus Toronto yesterday. I think that Paris are going to get a run for their money because I've been saying this all year long. If you beat Seattle 3-0 and you look very good against them, I can't really take that for what it's worth because Seattle has not
Because
necessarily
Seattle.
had.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But for Paris, if they're able to play as well as we got to see, if the Australians show up and you got Luca going off on a freaking tear, Shocks is able to hold off a lot of OEs versus London. We're now looking at if Scraps is able to bring enough heat against Paris to be able to shut down their ability to play super fast. Because I think Paris, when you're going up against London, something that we saw in their previous matchups, that it's very slow, it's very handshaky, and it's very, you take this point of the map, we'll take this point of the map. I'm going to play
Very
slow
polite.
here. You can have this
Yeah.
hard point, but I think Paris just needs to play fast here, and that's something that you can punish against London because probably only two of their members know how to play fast, and I'm only specifically thinking of Scraps and Dylan, and that's very scary when you're going up against Paris when you have all five members that are able to play just as fast as the next.
For me, I think this entire matchup is dependent on Dylan and Shocks. Dylan looked good in the first two hills against when they played early on when they played up against Toronto. I thought he played really, really well. But then we didn't really see much from him after that. And I think if Dylan can get hot, I think London take this series. It's going to be a close one, but I think London can take this series. On the opposite front, I think you hit it perfectly when it comes down to that trio of Australians. That has been the make or break of this team, I feel like, all year long. Kismet has had a couple of hot moments, a couple of cold moments, but has been largely consistent. Dens, I think, falls in the same category. But you're looking at that Shocks and Luca duo. Can they find a way to continue to be consistent, I would say, especially in Respawn, because that has not been the trend throughout the rest of the year, really, especially in Hardpoint, but also a little bit in the domination. So those are that. Other beyond that, again, we don't have the graphics labeled out for it, but we have the bracket here for you guys to take a look at as far as what else is coming forward. Just briefly, you've got Atlanta, Chicago. We already kind of talked about the potential of the Scump plays as well as he did today versus a team like Atlanta. Against a team like Atlanta. Uh, this Chicago team, I think, has some favor riding into the series. But then you also have Dallas and Toronto in that winners round matchup, in which the path to the Toronto Home Series championship went through Dallas for the Ultra. So who you got?
Atlanta versus Chicago. I have Atlanta. I think it's going to go to 4 for sure. But I think that Atlanta, the last time that they faced each other was in a weekend that Atlanta were testing the
Different
waters.
meta. Yeah.
Yeah, it was an entirely different meta. They were playing maps that they weren't necessarily concerned with because they already knew that they were going to champs, that they were going to find themselves here. Who they were going to face, it doesn't necessarily matter. It just so happens that we get Atlanta versus Chicago to Electric Boogaloo. But this time around, I think that Atlanta is absolutely going to take it out of the gates and come out swinging. I don't think that Scump has enough power behind them. You're almost really hoping that Priesta doesn't exactly have a showcasing here versus Chicago if you are a fan of Chicago. But for Atlanta, if they're able to play lights out, if you see Celium showing up, you see Sim popping off, you see Major Maniac sitting back with his tea in his mug, and they're able to play the same way that we saw all year long. I don't necessarily see Chicago playing well here, but for Dallas versus Toronto here, buddy, I got Toronto taking it straight up.
Yeah.
I got Toronto taking it in 5, 100%.
I would again the 100%, man. You keep going to 100%. By the way, have you ever seen the movie Breakin'?
It's been a while.
Okay, just
It's been
wanted
a
to make
while.
sure that you were appropriately referencing your Electric Boogaloo. It's a great movie. Jay Pistachio's definitely never seen that movie. Um, Camera,
That's for sure.
Mr.
I mean,
J.
I'm still here.
Oh,
I don't know.
awkward. Oh, I see. Justin turned your camera off
Oh, he
because
turned
of
my
the
camera off
100%.
because he's
I
upset that
was
I
like,
said that Dallas are
what
going to lose
the
again versus Toronto. And I
what
and I say and I say the word
the
again because I mean, I asked Justin this before we actually went live when we were sitting here talking about it when I wasn't the only Canadian in the call. But Pistachio, what
I
happened
get it.
what happened the last time that that Toronto faced against Dallas? What happened? Can you read it out for me?
Bro, like it's just the 100%. It was 250, 247, 250, 244 in around
All
11.
I'm gonna
And,
say is that
and then a
besides
70-point blowout
missions,
on domination.
I was. That's true. That's fair enough. But I was the only one that also called that Toronto was going to beat Florida today, and I also was able to bring that with a heaping mat of stats along the way. And guess who was right? Yes, it was only by 1 point on the St. Petra hardpoint, but
This
you
guy
shake your
puts his
head. You
glasses on and he immediately thinks he's super smart or something. That's what's happening. I no, I think that here for Atlanta, Chicago, I agree with you that I think Atlanta has the favor in that series. I think Chicago played well, but we saw Scump pop off today, and they barely got through the New York subliner. How are they going to try to improve that? Take it not just one, but likely need to go 2 to 3 steps further to beat an Atlanta face team that has looked absolutely incredible, especially in search and destroy lately. That's kind of my big worry, I think, for Chicago overall. On the opposite front, I don't know, man. I think that there is a chance that Toronto could beat Dallas again, but there, I just think that there's too much riding with Dallas right now. I've got Dallas taking this series. I think it'll go 5, but I don't think Toronto clutches up in 5.
I don't know, man. I
That's what I got.
listen. You know, as someone that loves history as much as me, Alan, you know, history is always doomed to repeat itself. So, you know, here we find
If
ourselves.
you if you don't
Yeah,
learn from history, history is doomed to repeat itself.
and
Don't take it out
we're
of context, there, Fox News. Okay. Golly. We've got time for questions
no
from
way.
you
You just
guys. I just called you Fox News. That happened. We've got time for questions if you guys have any. We'll continue to banter about this matchup while we're waiting for you guys to type them out in chat for you. But no, I think that
I'm offended.
the corrections that Dallas will make, I think, will get them past this Toronto team.
I mean, Shotzi's gonna have to play lights out. They're gonna have to pop off. They're gonna have to showcase
Fine
why
with that.
they're an MVP candidate. You know, Illy's gonna have to have a very strong outing. I'm looking at Hoop to not show up in map 5 only and being able to at least have a stellar few maps. And then you also have a lot of veterans that in between Clay and Krim that have been to countless amounts of champs at this point. They
Hmm.
understand this pressure. They're gonna be able to help out these young guns too. But I mean, for Toronto, the way that I've been seeing them the past few times that we've been playing, man, I mean, like, yeah, Methods didn't exactly have a great outing. Classic also got caught with their pants down more often than not. But I mean, for Cammy and the respawns, for Kleenex and Bance,
Period.
yeah,
For
I just,
Kleenex, period.
yeah, I mean, Kleenex has been
He's
absolutely
been
going off the
incredible,
rails.
dude.
Yeah,
He's been incredible.
and that for Toronto really helps them fulfill their roles, specifically Bance. I haven't seen Bance play this well the past 2 times in their home series and in this past 2 days of champs since the beginning of the entire year.
The thing about it is, like, my favor for Dallas, I think, rides off of your previous point of, yeah, you have some moments where Methods doesn't play well. Yeah, you have some moments where Classic doesn't play well. I think the only way that Toronto gets past Dallas is if all 5 players play at their best.
Sure, I mean I think that's a fair argument. I think that's a fair argument. But then you're also looking on the other side that if you only have 2 members of Dallas playing at their best, like what we've seen from them, and it happens from time to time, that if Illy and Huke aren't able to pull up the weight, and sometimes it's Crimsix or Clay, and if Shotzi's the only one that's leading the entire strides, this team crumbles. Absolutely crumbles.
Crumbles is a little bit negatively connotated from your
I'm
point
being
of
more
view.
harsh. I'm literally being more harsh just because Pistachio's in this call with us.
Oh,
I'm not gonna lie to you.
okay. Then
Yeah,
in
no,
that
yeah.
case, we'll take questions. Prizzy asks the Ravens' potential to put together a run. I think that the chances of them putting together a run is pretty slim. They are on the favorable side of a bracket, though, to put together a run, though. That said, if you could get past Paris tomorrow, you are 3-1 versus the New York Subliners, in which you're 10-5 in maps. That's good news. And that has actually been the one team. Wait, as I'm looking at the stats, that's the one team that you actually have a favorable domination record versus, which is really good news if you're a Royal Ravens fan. So maybe now that I'm thinking about it, if you could get past Paris, yeah, your matchups look decent to potentially break top 6. I think trying to stretch for top 4 is just that, a stretch. But your matchup is somewhat favorable if history again were to kind of speak to how the matchup would go. But that said, I feel like this New York team is playing at a different level right now than London is, and I think if London are going to make a stretching run or going to stretch to make a run, it has to come in the backhand of players like Zero. It has to come on the backhand of players like Dylan. They have to play super well, and we just have not seen that for more than a map here or there from either of those. Oh, I shouldn't say either of those guys because Zero played really well during Toronto's matchup.
That's true. That's really true. Zero went absolutely hamburgers all the way until they disconnected. So I
Yeah,
mean, I'm mostly looking at Shawnee just to be consistent from the beginning of champs all the way until now, along with Dylan. Consistency again. But for me to make a deep run all the way even to the top four, like maybe you beat Paris tomorrow. And I'm saying maybe again just because of how they looked in their previous matchup versus Paris.
agreed.
Don't lose to yourself here, London, for goodness sakes. But then going up against New York, yes, it is a winning record, but then you reach losers round 4 to where you're going to be facing the loser of Dallas versus Toronto. I would personally love to see a run back versus them versus Toronto, but I mean, versus either of those teams, I don't necessarily see them winning. I couldn't necessarily see them getting past there.
Limerick says whoever loses the Toronto versus Dallas prediction between me and you, loser should buy the winner a free burrito.
Okay. Okay.
I'm totally down for that.
Yeah, that's fine.
The problem with this is the nearest
Bring it
Chipotle is
on.
45 minutes away, so I have to drive literally an hour and a half in total to get a free
Yeah.
burrito when I win
Mine
tomorrow.
gets delivered to me and it's about 10 minutes away.
I
So
hate everything right now. Every year we get a top team drop right away. So with that said, do you think Dallas can be that team? So okay. So he's thinking every year at champs, we see a team that is in the top lose unexpectedly very quickly. Do you think that Dallas will be that team to drop and lose out quickly in this bracket? I
I'm
know
gonna
you're
tell
gonna
you,
try to you're gonna make the argument that yes, they could be. I just don't see it happening.
I don't necessarily see it happening either, but just because
but
Pistachios here, I'm gonna say it's yes.
but that said, we also never would have expected FaZe and 100 Thieves in losers round 1 of COD Champs last year, and that happened.
That's true.
So I
That's
mean,
also
like
true.
anything can happen. But I think the bigger thing is how this bracket is set up, where like even if Dallas were to lose, they're still finishing top 8 if they get DFR'd, top 6 if they get
Yeah.
DFR'd. It's not going to have that same impact that like you did when like Gen G gets out top 32 last year and FaZe and 100 Thieves are playing for top 16. You know what I mean? So I think it's hard to make that assessment because the only top teams, quote unquote, that could have that happen to them are Atlanta and Dallas. And I just don't think that that's going to happen.
Not a chance. That's all I got. There's just no way
Fair
that
enough.
it's it. Yeah. That I mean, even if Dallas get knocked down a losers bracket, they'll probably likely see New York. They'll probably beat New York.
Yeah.
Simply said.
That's a good question, JC. It's an interesting talking point for sure. And then Tom asks, are most players on 1-year contracts? I'm not sure. But essentially next year, could the league look very different? I would anticipate another massive roster mania with teams like
Yeah.
Seattle, LAG, Paris, London, Minnesota. All of them, I would say, probably second guessing some of their moves at the beginning of the year. I think you're absolutely going to see massive moves. I wouldn't anticipate seeing a full on, like fully fledged, quote unquote, roster mania like we had at the beginning of the year, where you've got RCDs talking with Gunless, like, hey, do you want a team? Oh, wait, look, it's T2P talking and getting back together again. And oh, let's just pick up Envoy. Like, you're not going to see major moves like that. I think largely you're going to see the teams stay pretty in core with what they currently have, but I think you're going to see a lot of amateur players getting consideration. I think you're going to see a lot of substitute move arounds and stuff like that. I think that largely, like for teams like Seattle and LAG, I wouldn't be surprised to only see Octane and only see Vivid on those rosters from this year into next.
Yeah, then you got Pistachio and chat just playing devil's advocate. There are those rumors that we go to 4v4, and of which case that shakes up things
Man,
even more. But
I can't see a world where Activision Blizzard would be okay with that decision making. That ruins, not ruins, but it throws
it
the
hinders a lot of
entire
careers.
infrastructure of the league in the air.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. It really does. Because I mean, then you're gonna have a lot of players just playing an AM again, and
Oh
that's just
man. Look at the
that's
new
just it.
question in chat, dude. If it were to go 4v4, who are you dropping from each team?
Come on, like
Man, go.
as they stand now. What
Yeah, as they stand now, who you dropping from each team? There's
are
no
we?
way I can answer that question. Name names, says Sean. See, this is where you guys get us into trouble because it's content and it's entertaining and you're interested, but then it shows up on Reddit or it shows up on a Twitter feed and everyone hates us.
Everybody already hates me, so I guess I'm in a good spot. So that's fine.
So here's the way I'm going to look at this. I'm looking at what players are playing what roles and where are you too invested. Like you want to keep both ARs most likely because it's 4v4. You're likely going to have maps where you're going to want two ARs. So you're keeping both ARs.
Sure.
Both ARs that are currently playing for every team are staying, with maybe the exception of people who just aren't playing all that well and lesser teams. But I think the conversation, if you were to drop City, would have to be between Abizi, Simp, probably Priesta from Atlanta.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
tough
I'd
though
agree with
because
that.
I don't want to drop any of those players if I'm in Atlanta phase.
You're looking at Atlanta, you're just like, man, look at this great 5-man roster we have.
Yeah, if you're Atlanta, Dallas, Chicago, you are sitting there saying it's 5v5 or we're out. For
It
Dallas, I
would
think
just
you're
suck.
looking at Shotzi, Illy, or Hugh. Again, you're not getting rid of Crib, you're not getting rid of Clayster
No
because of
way.
the roles that they play. Shots Pistachios and Shotzi's going back to Halo. No, it's not happening. Florida, same
Frosty
conversation.
might.
You're not getting rid of Awakening. You're not getting rid of Skies. It would have to be between Pharaoh, Frosty, and Havoc.
I
Same
think this is between
conversation
Frosty
for
and Pharaoh.
Chicago. You're not getting rid of Varsities. You're not getting rid of Formal, which means you're not getting rid of Scump. So it's probably between Envoy and Pristini. New York, you're not getting rid of Attach or Zuma or Mac. So I think that'd be
It'd
probably
be
between the temp or accuracy, but accuracy is your main
100%.
AR. I don't know. That's such a loaded question, dude. Like,
Because even if it goes to 4v4, like roles can also swap. Like
absolutely.
there's a lot of different
Absolutely.
arguments that can come around. But I mean, like if Modern Warfare was in 4v4, and God forbid I ever see what that freaking looks like. I don't know. I think that it would be in a really tough spot, to say the
Shipment
least.
domination, map 3. Let's go. That's a tough question, honestly.
Shoot
No,
house,
it's
bring it
okay. If
back.
the
Let's go.
Codcast could do it, you can. Wait, the Codcast did it? I didn't realize that.
I
Well,
didn't
if
see that.
Nameless and Pac-Man are doing it, then let's go. No, I'm just kidding. No, I think that, if you're one of the top 5 teams, that's a tough decision. I think once you look at like London, Toronto, Minnesota, Optic, Paris, Seattle, LA, that decision becomes a lot easier. London, I think Shawnee, because let's be honest, he wasn't supposed to be playing in the first place. It was supposed to be nasty when they picked him up.
Right.
For Toronto, you're probably looking at, ooh, yeah. You've got 10 people on that roster, and we've seen 9 of them, so that's tough. But I think you're probably looking at Bance, Classic. I don't think you could drop Cammy or Kleenex after this year. I don't think you want to drop Methods. Do you think that Nasty still warrants his place now? Absolutely. He's one of the smartest and one of the best players in Europe, without question.
And just to bring back a follow-up point too that Shift was talking about with like the whole roster mania when it comes around, that you'll see a lot of amateurs come up. I really hope that that's the case, because there
Yeah,
is a
dude.
lot of good amateur talent, specifically in Europe, that deserve their shot at playing at the professional level. Because I mean, yes, there's a lot of good NA talent. Then you have Renegades over in APAC, but it's just one of those things that for a lot of European players, they have a lot of talent that
Mm.
definitely can't go underestimated when they're going up against a lot of these teams during roster mania.
We're getting a bit off track, but we'll finish with this point because I think it's a good one. I would say that if there were to be expansion teams next year, that Team War Squad's the first team to get picked up in full.
Agreed.
Pick all 5 up. You're going. You're going to the big leagues. I mean,
Yep.
you're going to essentially do what essentially
Go
the
to the big
Vancouver
leagues, kid.
Titans did with Runaway, right? Like you're taking one of the best teams in the tier 2 scene and you're hoping that they provide the results. And obviously for like the Vancouver Titans, it got you to a grand finals. So, um,
They
yeah,
didn't
I
even
think
play
that.
the original Runaway roster in that grand finals.
Well, yeah, that's true too. But for Team War, it's like, yeah, they I think could be a team that with the right practice against these guys, with their work ethic and what infrastructure they have behind them, that would be a squad that you could instantly pick up. A full roster. The only thing you'd be missing is like management from Team War. You'd still pick up the coach, still pick up the analyst, still pick up the 5. And I think you could instantly be a top 8 team probably in the league. Yeah.
Vortex, it's nasty.
Dude, that whole roster is nasty,
It's
dude.
so good. So
Yeah, War
good.
could be a roster in itself. I think so too.
Mhm.
There's tons of talent all over. Like, it's just kind of sucks for the guys in APAC that they're in APAC in a COVID world where they don't get a chance to prove themselves locally, like Luca, Shocks, and Dens have all done in the past. That's just so tough. Maybe there could be expansion in North Carolina. You're home. Maybe. I'm thinking Raleigh if it goes to North Carolina, but I don't think that happened. But
It's probably not. It's definitely not going to be Charlotte.
no, too close to Atlanta.
Yep.
Although, I mean, the infrastructure for esports in Charlotte is actually, I think, probably better
It
than
is.
it is
It
in
is
Raleigh.
growing. It is growing. Scrolling over
Regardless,
here.
that's a lot of other talking points. We're going to say farewell for now, though, friendos. And I will say this much about tomorrow. We all have some different requirements that will keep us a little bit away from our normal run of content throughout the day. So, no playbook tomorrow afternoon, which is a shame because we nailed the one today and we nailed the one yesterday, I feel like. And then question marks kind of surround whether or not we're going to do the diffuse tomorrow, depending on if we can get the content lined up in time as soon as the stream ends. So just kind of stay tuned with what's going on with us on Twitter when it comes down to that kind of stuff. And well, if not tomorrow, we will for sure be doing the entire run of show for Sunday. That would put us at, right? Yeah, it puts us on Sunday. So yeah, we'll be back for that at least on Sunday. So we'll catch you guys on the flip. Hope you guys enjoy what is going to be an intense game of day of games rather tomorrow, and we'll catch you guys at the latest on Sunday. Until that point, don't let that fuse fizzle out. So long.